Hello, my name is Danny Flores. I am in your political science class, and today I will be presenting the article Increase in Liberal Views Brings Ideological Parity on Social Issues. And I will be debating on the side of liberals and the liberals versus conservatives debate. But I want to start off by talking about the article. I found it extremely fascinating that as time has gone on, liberal views have increased on a social basis, which I personally find is a good thing. It means more and more people are willing to change and adapt to our ever changing and social environment. Another thing I found to be pretty thought provoking was how economically we are staying more conservative. The change in social views comes primarily from the Democratic Party, as over the last 20 years, their views have changed from having more conservative viewpoints to having more liberal ones. But in the same vein, the conservative views shared by the Republican Party have become more conservative in the last 20 years, while independent parties have stayed almost the same, with independents having moderate views on both sides of the political spectrum. However, the uniformity found in conservative views on the economy stands out to me. It stems from the Great Recession in 2008 due to government spending for stimulus checks and healthcare, because both of those actions are seen as liberal and unfortunately aid in increasing inflation, so I can see why people aren't big fans of them. However necessary they may be, it was found, however necessary they might be. It was found during the poll in 2024 that independent and conservative views have become statistically tied when discussing economics, which to me was pretty fascinating.
Okay, well, hello. My name is Alexander, and I'm in your American Gov class. Yeah, and I'm going to be talking about uh, conservatism. Yeah.
Yes. I'm Lila. I'm also in your American Gov class. I will also be talking about conservatism.
Okay. Now, what is a conservative, right? A conservative, okay, is someone who believes the government should play a limited role in people's lives, right? A conservative could possibly argue that there is too I should argue that there's too much government control can weaken individual freedoms and responsibilities, right? So they want to push for smaller governments, right? Lower the taxes, which is good, and fewer regulations on businesses, which would obviously allow the economy to boom, as it is easier for businesses to get started, right? They believe that people and communities, not big governments, they believe that those should take a lead in solving the rules, right? Conservatives also value tradition, right, as guiding principles for their society. You know, in short, conservatism is about protecting freedom and stability by keeping government influence limited, okay, and allowing individuals to take responsibility for their own life.
Some liberals often argue that government influence is necessary to promote equality, regulate industries, and provide social support. They see the government as a tool to correct injustices, reduce poverty, and ensure fairness across society, and they are more likely to oppose the government restrictions on personal behavior and to support giving punishments for criminal offenses. As said in the text Basics of American Government, 5th edition, our textbook. For example, liberals believe government regulations can protect workers, consumers, and the environment, and that programs like healthcare and welfare are essential to creating a fair society. However, the Gallup article shows how more Americans have shifted towards conservative views on the economy, showing that conservatism is better for the economy when the government takes a hands-off approach.
Yeah, that is true. And conservatives, they genuinely believe, generally, right? They believe that government influence should be limited, right, to preserve individual freedoms, okay, personal responsibilities, and economic growth, right? And according to Politico's Conservatism Defined, it is said that conservatives emphasize that the government's role should be restraint, right? Focusing on the defense, law, and order rather than controlling every aspect of, like said, the economy. Thoughtco also explains that conservative view too much government regulations as harmful, right? Because it slows innovation, burdens businesses, which would be detrimental to the economy. and limits personal choices, which is very bad, right? The conservative caucus argues that excessive government power leads to inefficiency and dependency, while limited government respects the Constitution, right? And leaves room for families, communities, and businesses to solve their own problems.
Some liberals also argue that strong government involvement ensures fairness and helps protect vulnerable people. But conservatives counter that too much government leads to inefficiency and restricts freedom. Liberals may push for new regulations and programs, but conservatives respond that the best solutions come from empowering individuals, communities, and markets rather than expanding federal power. While liberals frame government as a necessary safeguard, conservatives stress that freedom and prosperity thrive when government influence is kept in check.
That's good, right? Now, to close it off, right? The conservative view is more beneficial to, say, the business, it says, right? And the economy, rather than liberal views, right? And the government should steer clear of becoming too overbearing on the political and economic state of the world right now.
Now, on to the debate. I believe we should be more liberal. A liberal is defined in the Basics of American Government, 5th edition, as someone who typically believes in evolving morals, a strong social safety net, progressive taxation, rehabilitation for criminals, and using the military to promote peace and human rights. James Madison had written, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." To be part of the government is to understand that we need to be governed. Without government intervention, we would have no FDA, which means our food could be contaminated with a germaphobe's worst nightmares. We also wouldn't have an OSHA. Think of the amount of Americans who could have died constructing the buildings we are currently sitting in. Or worse, imagine the regulations that wouldn't exist if we had no government intervention. Limiting our government would be a disaster in our modern age. There are just way too many things that we do in our day-to-day that without government regulation would be completely dangerous. Our roads would be covered in potholes. No one would want to fill them. We'd have no money to fill them. It would come more out of our pockets than it does already in taxes. And speaking of taxes, comes to my second point. I believe the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This is a quote from Spock in Star Trek. I selected this quote to represent the tax situation. I believe that more taxes should be paid the more money you make. As we learned in Chapter 1, our taxes fund schools, public safety resources, the roads we drive, etc., etc. These parts of our day-to-day are possible because we pay for them, but shouldn't we be able to have more? I personally would rather have too many firefighters, EMTs, police officers than too few. These jobs that protect our public safety come from our taxes. They make their living through our taxes. Another big thing that gets money from taxes is school funding. I believe that should be a priority. The very same institutions that are shaping the minds of the future of our country are still having to fundraise through sports and other means just to be able to afford the ability to create programs for students to become well-rounded. To me, it's just not fair that we argue about how schools should be when instead of arguing how they should be, we should just be focusing on making sure our future gets an education. These things shouldn't be a debate. Another thing that to me shouldn't be a debate is that it shouldn't be fair that we have a huge housing crisis when we can just take that in taxes as well. If the wealthy were able to pay more taxes, people wouldn't be on the streets. It shouldn't be fair that one man could have a house with 24 rooms, a garage full of 30 cars, but his neighbor sleeps outside in a cardboard box with a raggedy blanket, if he even gets the blanket or the box. Sometimes they just have the blanket. To me, that's not fair. But that's just how I feel about the issue. Thank you for your time.